Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Data plus Analytics, Turning the Corner on IT Chaos for Digital Transformation. My name is Raleigh Gould and I'll be your moderator for today's event. Our featured speakers are Dennis Drogseth, VP of Research at Enterprise Management Associates, and Clay Roach, CTO at StreamWeaver. Dennis brings over 30 years of experience in various aspects of marketing and business planning for service management solutions. He supports EMA through leadership in business service management, CMDB systems, automation systems, and service-centric financial optimization. Clay founded StreamWeaver in 2005 following 10 successful years of solving some of the toughest challenges facing IT operations management. Before founding StreamWeaver, Clay worked for Mercury Interactive, the middleware company, and Momentum Software. And before I hand things over to our featured speakers, I wanted the audience to know that you can log your questions anytime using the Q&A functionality. Dennis and Clay will be dedicating the last 10 minutes or so to answering your questions. So please feel free to take advantage of that. Also, today's event is being recorded and you will receive a follow-up email from EMA that will include the on-demand playback as well as some additional resources. So I hope you will check that out. And now I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to our featured speakers, Dennis Drogseth and Clay Roach. Take it over.
Hey, Raleigh, thank you. This is Dennis here, and Clay and I will be jointly talking. I'll be kind of moving the deck forward on covering most of the more generic research-related topics. And you can see what we have. We're going to look at digital transformation itself. What is it? And why IT is critical, why IT transformation is critical, and growth of advanced IT analytics, and what really is central to that, well-integrated data as a foundation. We look at benefits when that all comes together, and then on a conclusion, a few steps to make it all work once you go forward. And before I proceed, I'll just briefly mention you'll see a lot of data. So where's the data from? It's from a series of research projects that began in Q4 2015. The most recent is Q4 last year. The data sources, Digital and IT Transformation, a Global View of Trends and Requirements. That was a global look at what digital transformation is across Europe, Asia, and US. Advanced IT Analytics, a look at real adoptions in the real world. That focused on North America and Europe. And then most recently, we put together a buyer's guide for leaders in advanced IT analytics. And that involved primarily US-based companies, although we spoke to deployments, nearly 30 deployments throughout the world. So here we go. Why does digital transformation depend on IT transformation? So if you look at least how we defined it, and we got data on both fronts, digital transformation, of course, targets business optimization, and that includes internal organizational effectiveness as well as reaching out to external clients and consumers through digital investments in IT services. IT transformation is directed at optimizing IT performance to more effectively support business and organizational needs and outcomes, including IT's own performance in terms of its cost-value ratio. Needless to say, the two go hand in hand. Digital transformation, and this is an old joke of mine, I apologize if you've heard it, is not an act of Penn and Teller on the stage waving a magic wand. It requires a foundation in IT to make it work. Across our global research, we saw, not surprisingly, a slight edge with primarily focused on IT. And we saw a balanced number about half and half. Only about 15% that were primarily focused on digital. And actually 8% thought, they're almost the same thing, so we don't really separate them. So now we're getting to what makes it all work. If you're going to do IT and digital transformation together, what do you need, where do you need to go, what do you need to invest in. And we'll look at multiple dimensions at the high level, but one of them is clearly technology. And I would like to say, when looking at this chart, everyone looks at technology here. There was virtually zero, less than 1% who thought technology was not relevant. And this was true for both business and IT stakeholders. So it wasn't just IT saying this. 73% saying it's driven through technology, and then 27% simply supported. I think it's, of course, both, but without a good technology foundation, it won't happen. So when we then looked at what makes you successful or what makes you problematic, we looked at both actually, and we'll share both a little bit. Technology was in the forefront. You can see a very nice gradation and ratio between extremely successful, very successful, and somewhat successful. Their investment in key relevant technologies is one way to move forward. And what was most differentiating, you can see the list down below. Interestingly enough, app performance, service modeling in some level, CMDB, CMS, or app dependency mapping, social IT or social media for communication, but above all, and this crops up in a lot of our research, we'll see more of it as well shortly, data quality management, getting the right data to the right people and making sure it's relevant and consistent and good.
Yeah, I think that last point is really important too. It's probably one of the bigger challenges that we see with our customers is that for any analytics process, you end up spending almost 80% of the time just investing in data quality and related. So, that data acquisition side and, tuning and cleansing the data around any sort of gaps ends up being a really big consideration as you're going into an AIA project.
A huge consideration at times, and one that can be a sort of, the Sisyphean story of pushing something uphill and having it roll back down if you don't have the right investment. So what were the overall obstacles? And we looked at obstacles from 4 different perspectives, as you can see. We looked at them from those focused primarily on digital, those focused primarily on IT, then we looked at IT stakeholders, and we looked at business stakeholders. And to be fair, culture, organization, politics, etc., certainly led as a challenge. There's definitely, you need technology, but you also need the right kinds of leadership. It's interesting, I think, that you see ineffective IT leadership is standing out in IT transformation, and you also see it, if you look down at the bottom, tied with warring siloed tools, as perceived by business stakeholders. One of the messages we got is the business is looking to IT to move forward on the digital track, and they're looking for leadership that often isn't there because it's a brand new world for IT. But when you look at the hard issues in terms of technology-related issues, data scored right at the top, inaccurate or incomplete, or both and most often. And then that's a parallel to what the business perceived as warring and siloed ways of thinking and working and tools.
Yeah, one of those things we see, I'd say unfortunately, and is I think a lot of people are aware of the capability maturity model. I don't know if everybody's aware of what the capability immaturity model. And, for better or worse, in some organizations, we'll actually see, competing groups of people and, under specific tool sets in sometimes either negligent or sometimes, obstructive patterns of keeping each other from moving forward. So one of the things we try to do is to break down some of the silos, and an AIA project is one of those opportunities to bring some of the very valuable data that's being collected for monitoring tools and other across the IT organization into a single location and increase the value back to either IT itself or to the lines of business. So, being able to lower the bar as far as possible to connect those tools together and actually give you that holistic picture with as much tools, with as much data as you can get into your analytics is very important.
That makes a lot of sense. When you do that, Clay, are you seeing, what can I say, psychological or resist people who don't want to see and share data? Is that, do you run across that obstacle?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think this is just part of what's happened in IT culture over the last number of years. Things have become more segmented, and we've seen, the people kind of hide behind a set of tools and can actually obstruct the maturity of the IT organization. So, it's very prevalent, but I think that, we've also seen that when those groups they do come together under an AI project, we've seen that lines of business or even just application support teams are, they bind together a little bit more behind these efforts, and we actually see a lot of value just simply bringing some of these things together.
I'm sure, yeah. It's we've done consulting in various areas, including CMDB deployments, and it's one of those things that a number of people are wedded to their tools and they don't want to share it because they feel, job security, it's my tool, I do this, and I don't want anyone else to be involved. And that's not the way of the future, but it's still prevalent, it's still out there. So growth of advanced IT analytics, and that is EMA's term for what I think the industry is now calling AI ops. It was operational analytics at one point, a little bit of both and. The reasons why we go beyond ops, because we see values beyond operations, we see it unifying, certainly bringing in IT SM teams, service management teams, development, security, executive stakeholders, and business stakeholders. We'll talk a little more about that. But then the first question is technically, what are we talking about? So when we do our buyer's guide or we try to understand how to present what's really going on in analytics, we have to make a few rules because there are any number of variations on that theme. One of the rules is has to be cross-domain, and seriously cross-domain, not restricted just to network or just to systems or just to application or just to database, or conversely just to business outcomes. Ideally touching on all of the above, or at least most of the above. I'm going to skip to the bottom for a second. It requires advanced heuristics, and we'll look a little more closely at those on the next slide. But machine learning, certainly a prevalent requirement in many areas where the machine learns what's true and makes predictions or recommendations based on that. Certainly advanced correlation, anomaly detection, predictive training, just some of the above. And the other requirement at the most prevalent level is if you're looking across domain, you also look at many different data sources or types. Now, for instance, if it was just log files, as important as they are, that wasn't for us a way of getting into our buyer's guide. We wanted events, log files, whatever, on various different data types. And that's really the way to bring the world together.
Yeah, right. So on that point, Dennis, I think that what we see is that there's, often, whether you're using a single vendor or even best-of-breed tools, you're always going to have challenges with getting, all those various data types put together. And, part of the problem is that you've got separate network teams and, your application teams are spread out. And so getting all of those in an analytics tool, simply and easily is often a challenge. And, there's, whether it's a database or a monitoring tool, the bar there is pretty high sometimes to get the data put into the analytics tools.
It's a big challenge, and different tool sets have different designs to try to accommodate that, but having a data platform that can feed it is a great step forward.
Yeah, one of the other things is that, that data may not just be in a single location. We're seeing more companies with data, multiple data centers, cloud-based applications, PaaS and SaaS, and so, with all the security considerations and data volumes moving in between each one of those locations, the management of getting all the data into a single analytics tool can be a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Geographical spread, different types of data, and then you're dealing with often different organizations that have different ways of working in different places. That there's not a common fabric, it can make it crazy. This is a brief moment to consider what heuristics are being applied, and the ranking here was based on what our respondents told us in our analytics adoption research. Just to get a feel, so there was about 4 types per respondent. The list goes more to about twice its length. So process analytics in terms of business process or IT process, understanding and promoting efficiencies was at 38%. Anomaly detection, 35%, predictive trending, and data mining tied at 34%. Real-time predictive at 32%. Rules-based analytics at 27%. Predictive simulation, 26%, which is tricky, by the way. Machine learning, which is more general category, came in at 26% as well. So that's just a rough feel for it. There are also basic correlation and prescriptive analytics that tell you what you should be doing. Again, we saw a wide range, and most of the vendors that we were tracking to be serious players in this space had at least 4 to 5 of these heuristics in play. There's a lot of words on this slide, and won't be a pop quiz at the end, I promise. But actually, the core idea here is very simple. The core idea is that if you look at the blue and the green at the top, everything there is about basically performance in various dimensions. Could be relevant to hybrid cloud, could be DevOps, could be whatever. Everyone was either in play or for a substantial amount of time or just recently in deployment. The orange and purple are more about change and capacity. So what happens if you add those numbers is you discover quite conveniently perhaps 41 and 59% equal 100%. So what we're seeing is most directions in advanced analytics are performance driven. It's really the place to begin. Once that's in play, then it looked like in addition, of those 100%, because that was everyone, 60% were also doing something on the level of change and or capacity analytics. And a lot of the data can be cross-relevant. That's one of the beauties of analytics. It can cross, and of course the data surrounding it, it can cross many use cases. So again, to summarize, dark blue and orange fully in play, all deployed. Green and purple invested in, but not fully deployed and not fully actively using yet. The domain story is, I think, important as well. There's a human face to this, right? So in the 2 years when we did prior research on analytics adoption, and we're seeing the number go up based on our work last summer and fall, these were the totals we had. These are role-related totals. They are not just individual stakeholders. There can be hundreds of individual stakeholders, or thousands in some cases in very large environments, profiting directly or indirectly from the analytics investment. but these are roles. So obviously for domain, you would get things like network systems, apps, mobile, security. For cross-domain, things like engineering, architecture, DevOps, sometimes cross-domain service management, change management, asset, etc., capacity planning, process-related or process-driven or cross-domain capabilities or talents like architecture. And then finally, when we looked at when we looked at non-IT stakeholders who could be buyers along with the IT, then the range included high-level executive, line of business, online operations, business development, and partner management, supply chain, and user experience, which usually has a hand on both IT and the business side. So the great news to share here today, from what we're seeing, and this is based on a lot of dialogues and some consulting, is that advanced IT analytics is maturing. It's getting well beyond a point of just a technical idea, a magic quadrant somewhere that it looks promising. It's a real chance to make a serious investment. But the industry is struggling with it because there are a number of challenges, some of them, again, cultural, as we described. Some of them involve how to start and make this a step-by-step investment without going crazy. Some require a clear understanding of the benefits, often gets lost because we just talk too much about technology for technology's sake. And again, bottom line, and we're going to see this spelled out shortly in another chart, need to provide a more unified approach to data collection and assimilation.
On that first point, Dennis, I think that one of the challenges we're seeing with adoption is, what do you actually do with anomalies once you detect them? So, that's as an example that, really puts the IT organization into a different stance in terms of how you use those analytics tools more effectively. And so, you have to think about operationalization of the tools in order to be able to actually get the intended effect. So, similar to a monitoring root cause analysis approach, you have to have a way to, make sure you're propagating, socializing, and making improvements. Otherwise, why have those tools there in the first place? So,
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, one of the things, there's a lot of things we talked about in terms of how to fail here. One way to fail is A, not to have good data or current data, or B, to just think, well, we're going to put a lot of data in one place and have no idea what to do with it. In our CMDB consulting, that's a great way to fail too. We'll put all the data somewhere and then we'll guess what we're going to do with it. And often the data is never current. So you're answering, core issues by making it current, making it integrated, making it available for usage. And then it's up to the analytics investments to go beyond just discovering anomalies and making either predictive guidelines or actually prescriptive actions, or if then, if you do this, this will happen. This is what we really look for the advanced analytics. So it goes beyond just a hunt and search type phenomenon.
Right. And, there's kind of different ends of the spectrum, right? So on a, very simple side of it, you could just use anomalies for, making sure you don't have repeated incidents. In other words, something more along lines of a problem management aspect. And then, we've seen more on the farther end of the maturity scale, we have, companies or organizations that have looked to use analytics and the machine learning capabilities of these tools to do automated things like do automated resolutions, restart environments, take more proactive steps. And, that's a lot more important, especially as we're seeing environments become, a lot larger, more components. We're seeing containerization take a foothold nowadays. So, even, we've even seen some customers see the value of analytics tools simply as a way to tell them about the behavior of an application, right? Because they're not maybe used to a containerized system that is built with microservices and so on. So from an operational standpoint, these an analytics tool can actually just be informative to the operations team, just to say, okay, it does this every Tuesday or this thing every Wednesday, and it can spot those anomalies without the ops teams having to have a very deep understanding of those applications.
Yeah, there's so many levels of understanding behaviors and being able to rank them in a way that is prioritized and meaningful and contextual, and that's another. And actually, we'll come to the contextual part shortly. But yes, and that I would say, nonetheless, we're still seeing a lot of benefits through existing investments. But it's a growth area, and we're also seeing a lot of confusion and struggle. And too many people just try to do it all themselves, and I'm not seeing a big success rate there. So here we bring it together, well-integrated data and analytics, pulling it together. And as I mentioned, we'll show, this was again from the research on advanced analytics, and that includes, of course, machine learning, AI, whatever. That's another conversation, the difference between artificial intelligence, machine learning, and the terms are generally used. So I actually look for more specific things like, again, prescriptive, predictive, certainly self-learning, and what is the use case? What are we learning about? What are we doing with it? What are the biggest roadblocks? And, products are still emerging. I think number one's getting better. Number 2, 6, and 7 are still popping up as top of the charts issues in virtually all my research, whether it's security and operations, whether it's analytics, whether it's war room, fill in the blank. And of course, along with those are the issues in terms of the human issues, politics, leadership, skill sets, and resources. Clay, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I was going to say on the products being fully baked, I think that we're definitely seeing that. I think that there's a lot of companies trying to just be first to market. But I'll also say that there's also we're seeing a ton of innovation too, right? So just the advances that have been made in AI research and the tool sets available to developers, and you see a number of the cloud providers providing more deep learning capabilities into their tool set. And so I think that while yes, a lot of these products are not fully baked, I think that that's quickly turning, and thus the business leaders and the folks who are looking at IT to be more effective are going to be asking them to really make use of what's available out there today.
That's exactly right. And one of the things I think it's important to add, and we'll get a little more into it as we go. Advanced IT analytics, AI ops, fill in the blank, has a different DNA in many ways from what I call traditional business intelligence type or business analytics. And it's not just about a bunch of men in white or women in white coats sorting through data. It's a much more dynamic process, much more use case driven process in many ways. And as we'll see, involves a lot of integrations in many cases, not all, but in many cases with existing monitoring capabilities. So it's a layered story versus just data from raw data purely. And so both and apply. When it comes to the data, however, this lovely chart, and again, I promise there won't be any quiz at the end, was what we're seeing in terms of different sources and what was required. And it was interesting because we were not focused on the security team. Frankly, nor were we focused on Internet of Things. But this strikingly shows growth in security information event management. You can go through, you can see business process impacts, transaction down the line in various forms, log files, agent and bytecode instrumentation, flow, even end-user keystroke, which could be very informative about how things are being used, why they're used, end-user struggle, configuration topology. We didn't list CMDB, but it would fall into that category. Time series for performance, I probably would have expected that a little higher. Packets, and down the way you'll see wire, which is sort of more metadata. The only thing I'll add here, because I could go on and won't, is right in the middle there on 21%, you can still see spreadsheets, still part of the story, like it or not. So I think what's impressive, Clay, is your capabilities to pretty much bring most of this together. Is that right?
Yeah. So we keep saying data, and obviously we're a data tools provider, so we have a vested interest in making this process simpler. But that has been important, and this really fell out. Our process and our software actually is designed to simplify the acquisition of data independent of the type. And so we're often asked, okay, what's important for gathering business process metrics? And the easy answer is average response times and durations and so on. And so for each one of these various categories, the key thing is to make sure you're not just trying to pull up everything, but only the data that's relevant towards the use case that you specified previously. So remember the earlier slide, we talked about being clear on defining the business goals and objectives of your AIA project. And so, part of that is making sure that you stay aligned so that you're not just putting everything into a single place that you can do some of the analytics. We had a kind of reference to this. There was a question that came in about, talking about a data lake. I think that's a first approach that we see a lot of customers have moved to. There's a lot of tools out there that make that process easier to create a real-time system and data lake for doing analytics. What we often see, though, is that those data lakes turn into data swamps with lots of data that's not as relevant for the types of analytics use cases. And so, we look at, for a maturing organization to be able to more effectively use these tools, there is some amount of segmentation, and you don't want to have to re-implement and every single time capturing data from a single set of tools and send it to 5 different destinations. It should be a much simpler process, and so that's part of the reason we've created some capabilities to help our customers get there.
Right. It's a very interesting discussion and one we could spend a fair amount of time on, between the data lake tradition and the BI tradition and what we're seeing here. There's a reciprocal thing to say, though, that's contextual, which is from the business perspective, once you get into transactional-related data and transaction analysis and behaviors associated with transaction, you have a flip side dynamic story that is, I think, going to eat in significantly into territory that was traditionally just BI, by showing behaviors, by showing business outcomes, and by showing IT performance all in one bucket. Again, in many ways, a very different design point. So we've pretty much covered this, I think, pretty well. But here you go in terms of domain sources, and they were closely ranked, by the way. Database, security, network systems, all pretty close. And applications would be high, except that we broke them out into any number of different kinds of apps. So for instance, here you see cloud native apps, then desktop public, but or the end user experience testing, which is app related. So the average was 6 per respondent. The main message here really isn't the ranking. It's touching on a lot of areas at once.
Right, and I think one of the big challenges we see is being able to take data from those various endpoints and be able to get it into a normalized format. So, specific analytics tools require data at a certain rate or volume or put into specific series or time series, et cetera. And so being able to take it and put it into that common format, whether you're going to consume it with an AIA tool or just a dashboarding tool is pretty critical. And, once again, you want to be doing that multiple times. And so, one of the things that, considering that and, the complexity of each one of these, these sources, that integration challenge is one of the things that we address with our approach.
And it's a big challenge for sure.
So just kind of, talking about some of the, this is basically a reference architecture to deal with some of the data acquisition challenges that we see, just from a orientation standpoint. The data acquisition side, typically from origins, you're sending it to some sort of analytics tool as a destination. And then, the complexity of this comes down to the different file formats, the APIs that are available, and so being able to connect out to whether it's a REST-based or direct to a database or, a Kafka or file system. There's a whole number of choices there. So, that has to be able to operate both with an on-premise solution as well as, cloud-based. So, and with the real-time nature of each one of these solutions that, that most of the either business or IT organizations are looking for instant feedback, instant, information about anomalies in systems. And, you need to be able to get the data in very easily and quickly. Some of the other challenges are just, the data typing and normalization. So one of the things we do is to take whatever sort of format and put it into its respective categories, whether it's a metric, event data, topology, or CMDB, or log information. And so each one of those has different criteria for how you collect it, how you normalize it, and then, being able to send that data out to, multiple different types of destinations. And so, one of the things our upstream product does is to take, basically make that process a lot easier. And so, without you having to have a PhD in every single one of the technologies you're integrating into and spend, a large amount of time trying to just do integrations, we make that a process that's, it's measured in days as opposed to weeks, months, and years. And, that's, I think for our customers, we've seen, for an analytics project that would otherwise take 12 to 16 months just to do data integration, if we can, front load that and include, 10, 15, 20 different data sources out of the gate, then those analytics solutions, the actual value of those analytics tools is realized a lot more quickly. And, we see that even in a kind of a micro version, just in a POC, and where, if you're kicking off an analytics POC with a tool and, it's going to take you 6 to 8 weeks just to get data in there and another 2 to 3 or 4 weeks for it to churn and actually start providing some meaningful data back. That's a long time. And for, upper management to see a project take that long just for a POC, it makes getting an actual purchase of an analytics project or product potentially even more problematic. So,
no, it's all critical.
Some of the.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, I was just going to say the last couple things is, some of the other challenges to think about is, security, easily being able to add or remove content or, data sources, and, scale. Scale is also a number one requirement. Is, these analytic solutions are very hungry for data. They're okay when they have a couple of different data sources, but really the value starts to come as you feed them more data and they have more to churn on. They'll provide a lot more value. And so data volume and being able to scale those solutions quickly is something we're seeing that a lot of our customers have asked for.
It makes a lot of sense, 100%. So along the lines of some of the things Clay was describing, and also along the lines a little bit of why this is not just traditional BI, there's a need for, among, again, raw data sources, everything from spreadsheets to whatever, hooking in with monitoring tools. In our respondent base, the average goal was to get about 15 on different monitoring tools. Putting it in perspective, that's crazy but true. I spoke to a mid-tier international manufacturer who estimated they had 300 different brands of monitoring tools in their IT organization. So it's not a small question to make it all work. The value of harnessing monitoring data, and it's a double-edged sword, but the value can be you already have a level of analysis before you bring it into the bigger web. So you're getting analyzed data to work from. This is very distinctive to advanced IT analytics, very different from what typical BI anyway would be.
Yeah, and this slide kind of really kind of tells you where this is where the rubber meets the road is where we see it, is that your ability to do a couple of tools effectively yourself, where you're going in and learning APIs and building integrations into monitoring individual servers and so on it's quite a bit of work. And so as you start to add up and look at a project which is effectively a development project to do what's all of these integrations, you can quickly see the value of being able to do this quickly with a software product. And so often we'll have conversations with customers who are starting down the path of implementing, okay, hey, we're going to do it ourselves. And then, 6 to 8 months later, we're generally talking to them again about, okay, yeah, we did a little bit ourselves and we learned some good lessons and we're better off for it. But, now that analytics has become a more core, requirement for the business and for IT, they're looking to scale this out, and adding 10, 20, 30 different more things into the bucket makes it a really big challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. There are parallels between the configuration management system and analytics, and what is trusted sources or untrusted sources, bringing them into the pot, making them work. It's really interesting to watch the evolution. Another parallel, maybe, is the need for context and interdependencies and insights. And again, this is distinctive to advanced IT analytics, where you have a dependency mapping of some kind, topology of some kind, and what's critical, actually application to infrastructure, probably number one. So you could flip those two, then infrastructure to infrastructure, app to app, or app to app component. Then we're looking at non-virtualized to virtualized environments, all the interdependencies that it takes basically to bring cloud and hybrid environments together in support of business services with an awareness of where everything resides is critical to the business outcome and the business service. Non-trivial, very dynamic, to be worthwhile. We're seeing a lot of innovation here, and it's also part of bringing the data together in a reflexive way.
Yeah, that data mapping is something that we see a lot, and that it's becoming more critical, right? As the topologies of applications are becoming a little more, quite a bit more complicated with, containerized and, elastic systems. So, the ability to actually pinpoint where specifically and take either a manual or automated action becomes, not only important to the analytics tools, but also just from an operations perspective, to be able to drill down specifically to a server or an application and know where that problem is, so that you can actually take that corrective action. I'll also say on the flip side, and this is a conversation that we've had with we have partnerships with a number of the analytics vendors out there, and some of them take this topology-centric view of the world, right? And looking at if it's a CPU on a server, then there's a certain correlation and a certain weight that can be attached to that, if it's servicing a specific application, for instance, then you can use a topology map to actually create the and do some of the heavy lifting in terms of the analytics. But we've also seen there's some challenges to that, right? And that a kind of pure mathematical approach where you don't use the topology connections, but rather have a more pure model where topology is not in play may sometimes allow you to correlate things that you may not know are actually correlated. And topology sometimes can get in the way. And so, yes, it's good to have the interdependencies in the service model for some aspects of the analytics tools, and for others not so. And I think once again comes back to what are you trying to get out of the solution, and making sure that's mapping to the actual capabilities of the analytics tools that you're working with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this data here is I think we had about 6% who were not trying to apply topology at some level or dependency to analytics. But of course, in terms of what's out there in terms of analytics vendors, it can be both and. Not every investment in analytics needs a topology. I would say, though, that having a topological or a dependency map of some kind, one that ideally can be visualized, has huge values in terms of unifying organization, in terms of how they work together, who owns what, how to move forward, and how to isolate problems. I think it's still a strong value, not that every analytics investment needs it. So we're going to wind up pretty quickly so we can have time for a few questions. But let's talk briefly about some of the benefits. All right, I said briefly, and here you go, right? A long list once again. But the messages, and then these are investments, benefits that we saw from actual deployments. In actual average was about 4 per deployment. And they range, generally they're broad, but you look at the top 2, one is broad, more efficient use of cloud resources, then rather narrower, more efficient use of storage. But then you get classic faster time to repair, faster time to deliver new services, better OpEx efficiencies, better compliance, more proactive capability to prevent problems, etc., more efficient use of capacity and infrastructure, so critical for cloud. Down to 23, improved user experience, which I would rank very high as important as well. Down the list, interesting, a standard feature for the analytic vendors is less time spent writing and maintaining rules and thresholds, and that was at the bottom. So I guess people are really looking for a broader kind of impact here.
Dennis, I guess one of the things we were talking about a little bit earlier is that the analytics tools can sometimes just be a nice informative way for the IT monitoring teams themselves to be better, right? Even if they are using manual thresholds and or trying to doing some level of baselining, that the analytics tools can inform them a little bit around how they should be doing those and where they should be setting those thresholds.
Right. It can be both and usually is, and also some of it's a matter of trust. And where do you bring in the automation, and do you trust the genius analytics solution to pull the trigger? Probably not. You might want to have somebody look at the options, but all of the above bring value. And and if you look back in history, when we were doing event management and we had network platforms, we had I won't name the vendor, but we had customers where our solution would isolate the problem, but after the solution did, they'd go and ping to make sure it was true, and they were happy. They were very happy with using it. So it's an evolution, how people adjust, and of course the technology itself. Just quickly, look at what's in bold here. I think very striking. 3% of our problems were done proactively. Now 88%. That's huge. Hours, mean time to repair dropped to as low as 12 minutes. Our average, when we look at war room data that's just come in, average is about 6 hours, and it can, of course, be multiple days. So I think that's quite strong.
Yeah, we had a financial customer that, their first implementation, and frankly, their initial benefit was just, having that, that single pane of glass effectively, so that they could just use the analytics tool as a way to get all of their disparate tools, their disparate monitoring tools into one place. And, that's a nice, easy, early checkbox, even before you start to leverage the deep learning and the other AI types of capabilities these tools have.
Yeah, that's nonetheless very significant, really key. Another storyline around these investments is they are unifiers for IT as a whole, not just operations, and bringing development into the story, bringing security into the story, data that can unify that decision making becoming increasingly important. And needless to say, we could do about 20 webinars on just these topics alone, but very central to what we're seeing with analytics success. Another feature, of course, is being able to better direct what IT is doing to business objectives. Because once you bring the business data and IT data together, you get a better storyline. And that's exactly what happened here, a much more proactive approach.
Yeah, I think that, if you look at just IT organizations in general, they're sitting on a huge wealth of information that's already locked away in their existing monitoring tools, for instance. And so, just being able to pull all this stuff together, that can quickly show that to a line of business that IT is being more proactive and more effective, because for better or worse, IT has gotten a bad rap in the last few years, but I think that analytics gives a nice opportunity to turn some of that perception around.
I think analytics with the right data can be a great unifier and really be a foundation for IT transformation, and so digital. Very briefly, if you want to look at sort of a top of mind fingerprint on or thumbprint or whatever on how to go forward, number one, you want to make sure you're investing with an intention for use case, and you're investing in technology to make those use cases work. You're not swept away just into technology for technology's sake, even if some vendors market to that. The other is for a truly cross-domain initiative that will allow IT to function more effectively and bring business value. You need senior executive leadership from IT to support all the process and cultural and organizational fragmentation that may be getting in the way. It doesn't mean to be a roadblock, but good leadership is still important. So along with process and dialogue, integrations with automation, which we haven't talked much about, are also key to optimize that analytics investment. You've got the wisdom, you want to be able to act more quickly, automation can do it. Then basics like budgeting and planning, which tie back to use case, organization and role, build from a critical use case or set of use cases. Don't try to do everything at once. Same way to fail with the CMDB, by the way. And ensure that the data, above all, the data you need to go forward is really assimilated, current, and relevant, all of those things, and stays current. Non-trivial, as you know, but the value is immense once you have that foundation. I think, Raleigh, we have 4 minutes. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, for the sake of time, the only thing I'd say on the last one is that just keep in mind time to value, right? Because the best laid plans are great, but unless you can turn around some business outcomes quickly, then you're going to be potentially penalized. So.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you both. We do have time for some questions. If you have any, please feel free to log them in the Q&A panel, and I invite you to learn more about StreamWeaver. I've provided some a URL and email for you up on the screen, and I'll include it in the follow-up email. Dennis and Clay, I'm going to throw these questions out to you, and if you both want to provide feedback, That's great. Dennis, I'm going to start with you. And again, Clay, if you have anything to add, feel free. The first question is, from a computing perspective, recognition has been an accepted concept for decades. What does your research find regarding the acceptance of cognition, i.e. AI, machine learning, etc.?
Well, I'm not quite sure how to answer it in a short way because it's woven into everything we've researched. And of course, the terms can be themselves, artificial intelligence can refer to everything from bots to basically machine learning, right? So I think the main thing is we required, when we did our buyer's guide, for instance, some level of machine learning, and in most cases it was fairly significant. And I think, as Clay really well pointed out, you want to have the discover abnormalities. You want to be able to learn what's true and what's not true and what's relevant. But you also want to be building in capabilities to take prescriptive directions and sometimes even automate around what you find. So it's a great foundation. They're both very general terms. They can mean a lot of things, but you need to build from them toward action and automation.
Great, thank you. Another question that came in is, I'm wondering why you're not using the term data lake or data reservoir as a key requirement here. What's the reason for not using it?
I'll be brief and turn it over to Clay.
Sure.
I've actually been at war to some degree with just the notion of the data lake or big data for its own sake, because too often, again, the heritage to me, again, reminds me of the old CMDB, where you put everything in one place, sort of, and then maybe scratch your head with what do we do, or we search through it, or what is it? I'm not against a data lake, but I think what really needs to happen is a foundational data layer that is current, dynamic, and use case relevant, which is a little bit different than traditional data lake. So, Clay, anything you would like to add?
Yeah, I think we actually touched on this a little bit, right? I think that the data lake approach is typically a first pass for some customers to just take the first step into analytics. Once again, we see that there's you have to have a structured approach to that and ensure data quality and normalization so that you can effectively use a data lake. And once again, if you start putting everything in the world, it becomes kind of like your hard drive. You can't find anything, and then you're less effective. So we actually see a drive towards some amount of specialization, and even moving to in some cases more specialized data stores that are specific for an analytics solution. Maybe collecting the same data in all the same locations, but you may have some tools that need to do just dashboarding and others that are going to do anomaly detection. And so being able to separate the data out into specialized use cases actually ends up being a direction that we see more mature customers move to. Not to say that the lake isn't important, but it's kind of a starting point.
Great. Thank you both for your insight on that. And that is going to wrap up our Q&A because we are at the top of the hour. I wanted to thank everyone for taking time out of your schedule to join us. Please do check out the follow-up email from EMA that will include resources from today's event. And I hope that we will see you at a future event. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.